Hello, listeners, and thank you for joining us for this podcast, focusing on cybersecurity. Joining me today is Kirsten Cremona, a manager within PwC Advisory Practice, focusing on cybersecurity. Hello, Kirsten.
Hi, Elizabeth. Thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure.
Just to give a bit of context here, we're speaking about the bad guys who want our data, and they're doing everything they can to get it. So the practice of cybersecurity is protecting all those assets, such as financial records, health records, and making use of technology and technical experts to achieve this objective. We're in October, which is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. The theme for this year is Do Your Part, Be Cyber Smart. What I like about it is it gives the impression that it's focusing both on the business side but also on individuals, meaning that all of us have a role in this. What can you give us some insight about this, and what do you think why the theme has been chosen?
So this year's theme is essentially stressing the importance of making smart decisions, of being vigilant, of being conscious and aware of the pervasive risks introduced by new technologies. Let's break it down first to the personal level, as you rightly mentioned. There needs to be more accountability, more responsibility into one's personal data, even the personal data that you are that you have online that you need to protect, and no one else is there to protect it for you. So it all starts from there. I mean, if you look at the last couple of months, from a personal level, we've seen a lot of threats that were happening. So in the local context, I mean, everyone remembers these fraudulent SMSs that people were receiving, posing as Multipos, LESA, and other authoritative entities, trying to obviously fish people into doing a payment and getting scammed. So essentially it all starts from there, I would say. And the aspect of data is very important in what we put online. So what that means is that sometimes we need to stop and think what we are uploading, because at the end of the day, in these instances, all it took is a phone number, really. Now, a phone number, you need to share it for it to be valuable, right? But in essence, there are a lot of data that perhaps you need to be more careful before you actually post it online. You need to be conscious what form you're filling, so on and so forth, so as to minimize the exposure. Now, if we move on to the business aspect, right? So there's the personal aspect, there's the business aspect. As an employee within a company, you have access to data from your organization, different levels of data depending on your role. So again, there you need to almost or equally protect the data as it is as your own. And the cyber threat has accelerated because of many things that were happening in the last year and the year before, with the remote working, with the COVID pandemic, that aspect. So we've seen lots of threats around phishing that have actually skyrocketed, and this has accelerated the need for businesses to take action and to ensure that employees are not only aware. No, because we need to evolve from just awareness to more accountability and responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Kirsten, you're mentioning that during COVID, we have seen an increase in attacks. Do you think that businesses took immediate and appropriate action to safeguard the data they hold of clients?
It all depends on the maturity level that pre-COVID that company had. So if we're talking about companies which were not that in tune with the cyber world pre-COVID, and as soon as COVID hit and the cyber threat actually accelerated, we've seen companies taking the steps once they started shifting their operations more online. So there was more the remote aspect, virtual private networks, cloud resources, and then there was that bit of a lag for some companies to actually get up to speed, but other companies which were already obviously either technology based or they were already online based, probably those suffered a bit less. But yet again, the remote setting was challenging for many people who never have worked remotely for various aspects. First and foremost, there's the security boundary that the organization network offers. If you're sitting in your office within your organization, you are protected by the company's network, so there's a feeling of more security in that aspect. But if you're working from home, you are more becoming the first line of defense. So there was that aspect. The second aspect, I think, as well, is there's no one immediately to turn around for consulting. So if I receive, for instance, a phishing email, I want to double check whether it's actually a phishing email, because actually I think it's suspicious at first. We don't really know if it's phishing. Being alone in your room, in your office, you can't really turn to your colleague and actually ask, listen, did you send this email? Or you think this is phishing? So then again, that poses more challenging as well on people who are less technical and less IT savvy.
Very good. To be fair, I hadn't thought about this, that sort of working remotely decrease the consultancy aspect with respect to cyber as well. From my experience, when hear business people saying, yes, I have a firewall, we have an antivirus, we have content filtering. So I am taking care of my cybersecurity, but we still have breaches, and businesses are still getting compromised sometimes. So are they doing enough? Are they possibly viewing cyber as a product rather than a service? So it's not something which you do it once and you're done, but it's ongoing in my view. What do you think?
I think that's a very good point, really, and a point that in my role as a consultant, I get to experience a lot with clients and with people out there in the industry. Of course, mentioned that yes, cybersecurity is not a product. It's not something that you buy, just a one-time investment. You put the security in place and you're set. And we've had these questions coming sometimes, like, okay, if I install this product, or if I do this assessment, almost can you guarantee that we are secure? And it's always a challenging question and challenging answer that follows. Why? Because it's a continuous thing, and the cyber threat evolves. We've seen the landscape shifting even in the last couple of months and years because of the pandemic, but even before it, other events that actually hit the world. There were various big ransomware attacks, the NotPetya attack, for instance, or the WannaCry. People who are technical, I'm sure they're familiar with these names.
The decision makers in business need to be, let's say, educated or trained as to what really means to handle cybersecurity properly.
Yes, definitely. Cybersecurity, as I like to say, is not an IT problem, but it's actually a business problem. The responsibility when it comes to cyber risk in the past usually fell on the laps of the IT professionals. But and back then it was something that perhaps it was manageable in that way. But as the threat landscape evolves, that is not sustainable for sure. So definitely the people in charge in a company, the operational management, the CEO, they need to not only be aware, but also they need to be trained to understand cyber risk and how to actually manage. And at the end of the day, it's all about having a framework in place, a security program within your organization. And what that means is having different components, different aspects that actually fit all together. You cannot just rely on, for instance, doing testing, and you're not really putting proactive measures in place, or the other way around. Every component has to work with each other and have a holistic program, depending on the size of the organization, of course. So there's that aspect of proportionality.
Very interesting. I must say, I never thought the extent of how wide the topic is, especially now that we're moving a lot in technology, is quite impressive. I want to shift a bit now the attention to Malta, especially like the financial sector, which is of extreme relevance, of course. Would you be able to give some insight as to what are the initiatives that are currently happening as we speak, and how is this topic, which is constantly gaining so much importance, being addressed?
So initiatives have already happened, and some are in motion actually. So the first one is the SWIFT, the organization responsible for the financial messaging system, and the organization bearing the same name of the SWIFT network. And SWIFT is saying that now all SWIFT users, like banks, have to actually perform independent assessment to comply with the SWIFT requirements. So what that means is that banks, for instance, have to actually outsource these type of assessments, or actually have specialized people, technical people, who are independent of the people implementing the SWIFT infrastructure to perform these type of assessments. And in fact, since early this year, we've already been working with a number of banks locally on helping them to be compliant coming the end of the year. The second point that I'd like to mention, and this is going to be, I think, bigger, is the Digital Operation Resilience Act, or DORA in short, which the European Union will be putting into effect around mid next year. So what's DORA? DORA will be introducing 5 pillars of information security and cyber security, which financial services institutions, so we're talking about all financial service institutions here, not just banks, will need to be complying with. And we're talking about the aspects of risk management, incident reporting, so we've been sharing information about incidents, sharing information on intelligence and threats that are happening. The third party risk management aspect, which we've just spoken about as well, and digital operation resilience testing. So we're talking about penetration testing to the next level and introducing more what we call the red team assessments in our field. So these 5 pillars are going to be a very important change, and I think it will be a game changer. The MFSA locally and even the EBA have already started releasing guidelines since 2019 and 2020 to actually start this maturity process. But at the end of the day, DORA will be the real thing now. It's not guidance, it will be put into effect, it will be put into force. And my final piece of advice here is for financial institutions to actually start planning right now.
I was going to ask you, in fact, for a non-expert like me, it comes quite detailed, these 5 pillars. Would you say that the majority of businesses locally are prepared for it? And also, I think they should start like yesterday planning about this. What's your view?
I think the way you've put it is a bit more accurate, I would say. Yes. I mean, it depends on the size of the business and the risks that are pertaining to the operational aspects of that business and how it conducts its business. So yes, essentially, the sooner they start, the better, because in my view, there are companies which have to do a bit more work than others to actually be up to speed and be prepared to comply with DORA. So
and
the time is now.
DORA, I would say that all this gives peace of mind to businesses as well. So ensuring that you abide by these pillars, and even it gives more confidence to your client, your customers, that if you're handling your cybersecurity well, sort of they would be more willing to share their data, personal details, etc., with the business.
Yes, I mean DORA will be putting a coherent and structured framework across the European Union, but as a byproduct, it's also increasing trust in society, because when it comes to financial institutions, probably there isn't another area where it's riskier than that.
Yes, and the expectation is higher as well.
Definitely. So, and thankfully, the European Union is raising the bar. So, again, the time to start planning is now or yesterday, as you put it. And the reason being is that cybersecurity is not a sprint. It's a marathon. It's something that's continuous. So the sooner you start, the better you are prepared to face these new challenges.
Kirsten, I'm pretty sure that you encounter various interesting situations in the variety of projects that you are involved in. Can you perhaps share with us an interesting or challenging story that was proved out to be a learning experience as well?
Yes, Liz. I mean, I can probably think of 2 or 3 stories, but obviously conscious of time, and I'll just go with this one. I think this is the best one. So this happened a couple of months ago. I think it was early this year, and our team we were involved in a penetration testing engagement for a big local client, and this was a full-blown test. So we were testing their external systems, their internal systems, their websites. So it was quite a large project. And I remember we're at the point where we're doing this internal testing, but initially we're doing this remotely. So we're connected via a virtual private network and we were testing their internal network remotely. And we were struggling a bit to find something, something juicy, as we like to say in our field. So we wanted to potentially find something that can enable us to see whether we can actually compromise the network.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember then sort of discussing internally with my team and saying, let's try to go on site there physically and potentially we might find something more interesting there. And so I actually called the IT manager of this company and told him, listen, we would like to come over there. Mind you, this was during the COVID period, so obviously it was we need to make sure it will be safe, things like that. Anyway, he agreed. He didn't have an issue, and we agreed on the date, and we went on site. And they put us in the same room as the IT people over there. So there were the IT people doing their own thing, and we were in the same room. We had our own desk, and we were doing our own thing. And we were performing the testing. Time was pressing, and we still were a bit stuck. And at some point later in the afternoon, we overhear this conversation going on a phone call, and obviously when there is a conversation in the background, you don't immediately pay attention to it. But at one point, I stopped suddenly and really pay attention to what's being said, and the conversation went like, "Yes, I just reset your password. Your password is +100 exclamation point." And all of a sudden, obviously, I turned towards my colleague, and he was smiling, I was smiling, and we both know what we were thinking at that point in time. And with this knowledge, the knowledge of this password, we basically plugged in one of our scripts that we were doing password guessing of all the accounts within this company. We plugged in this password, and potentially we were expecting a good result, and in fact, from around 600 user accounts, if I remember correctly, over 100 of them were using the same exact password.
Wow.
So
quite a discovery. Let's watch out when there's Kirsten in the room. Please be careful what you're saying, as she might be overhearing.
Yes, I mean, obviously there is some learning outcome out of this, right?
What I'm understanding is that sort of a password was being reset for then the users to update a more secure password, which was not being done.
Exactly. So there are two angles to what was happening here. So first and foremost, the fact that they were using such a simple password when they were resetting accounts for password accounts for people, and usually best practice is setting something randomly, even if it's a short password, but it should be randomly. And as you rightly pointed out, the second issue here was the fact that they were not forcing users to change the password once it's been reset. So as time progressed, you had a situation where around 15% of your workforce were effectively using the same exact password. And as you can imagine, that eventually led us to compromise the whole network. And we had quite an awkward conversation then with the client when we were pointing out this issue.
I'm sure he saw value add from the exercise, because obviously it was definitely a learning experience for them as well. And thankfully, this issue was discovered during this project being carried out rather than through a very potentially serious experience by true hackers.
Yes, exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the whole objective of these kind of exercises. We need to find issues, security gaps, and weaknesses before the bad guys do. So that's where we come in as a specialist, and I mean, yes, there will be an awkward conversation that follows, right? But it's better like this
Yes,
than
definitely.
facing the board, with a real hacking situation.
And it's impressive. It's such a simple story, but behind it, it could have had potentially serious consequences to the business. Kirsten, I have my last question for you. If you had to mention, say, three focus areas that businesses should really focus on and with respect to cyber considerations, especially considering the rapid increase we are seeing and the specialization of threats as well that we are seeing year after year.
Yes, so in my opinion, based on what I frequently encounter out there in the field, most organizations perhaps should start by first assessing a bit their current state of their cybersecurity posture, their maturity. And this can be done either through some form of a health check exercise, doesn't need to be overly complex, it could be through some benchmarking against maturity models that are available out there. And the objective of such an exercise would be identifying those areas where need improvement, need more investment, areas which will require fine-tuning, and also those areas which need optimization. So they could be in a good shape but need optimization. Secondly, I would advocate in more testing and more testing. Why? Because even if you consider the traditional type of testing like vulnerability assessments or pen tests, nowadays these are not enough. A one-off testing engagement will be useful, but it's a point-in-time assessment. So you really need to incorporate the element of security testing in, say, your change management aspects, your software development lifecycle if you're a software company, and other areas in your business. Last but not least, and we'll close on this point, is making cyber risk a business issue. Before it is too late, of course. I cannot but not stress the importance of this. I mean, as someone clever once said, there are two types of companies out there: those which have been breached and those which will be breached. And therefore, cyber risk should be treated as a tangible operational risk, something that if it materializes, it will potentially disrupt your business, ruin your hard-earned reputation, and really cascade a lot of other things that you need to sort out. Unfortunately, but it is the truth, it is not a question of if, but rather when.
Before closing off, Kirsten, I have a bit of a personal question. I hope you're going to be honest with us. Have you ever been hacked yourself?
Maybe not.
Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you for your time and for this interesting discussion. And the biggest thank you obviously goes to our listeners for tuning in.